All right, so I'm going to try to say this as neutrally and as non-combatively as I can because this argument has never made sense to me and it's actually like a little not okay. Because like yes, the map of Prythian is like an amalgamation of the UK and the Night Court is an amalgamation of like where Scotland is approximately. But are you going to sit there and tell me that Scotland does not have people of color? Both in modern times and beforehand? Like, what? And on top of that, like, this is a fantasy world. It does not matter if it's an amalgamation of the UK and the UK has no people of color, which is emphatically not the case. It doesn't matter because it's a fantasy world. She made up the world. She could put whatever the hell diversity in it that she wants. This is the same like dumbass argument they had for the Rings of Power, where they're like, "Oh no, there are no black people or there are no like non-white people in the Lord of the Rings." It's literally a fantasy world. It like, are you serious? You also said something like the Summer Court is already described as darker skin tones, so like that makes sense. But that means you're telling me that the only reason why a person of color should be a person of color in the like in a fantasy work is if it is plot relevant, and that's just a very weird argument to make in the year of our Lord 2024. Nobody asks a white character to have their whiteness be relevant to the plot, you know? Like as an example, the Silmarillion, the Rings of Power, the House of Finwë, they're all pretty well described physically. Where like the Fëanorians have pretty diverse hair colors. The Fingolfin's kids all have dark hair. Finarfin's kids all have blonde hair. So it makes sense that like they all kind of look similar because they're all cousins. But then this man gets cast as an elf who is not part of the House of Finwë, and everybody lost their fucking minds. Like, this man's skin color was not relevant to Arondir's story or whatever, but that doesn't mean that he still doesn't get to be the skin color that he is, because just because it's not relevant doesn't mean that seeing it there doesn't matter. Also, as an aside, like this man in particular gets a lot of shit from the Lord of the Rings fandom just because he's an elf with short hair. And honestly, leave this Puerto Rican king alone. That really has nothing to do with the argument of like why I'm arguing with you, but like it really upsets me. So like we need to talk about it. I don't know, man. This just always felt like a really bad argument to me because just because it's supposed to be the UK, it doesn't mean that it is the UK. Sarah gets to make her own rules for that, and she doesn't get to kind of shorthand the UK in order to excuse her lack of diversity in her fantasy world. And she does have diversity in the fantasy world, where like the Illyrians all look a certain way and like the Archeron sisters have a very specific look, like that kind of thing. But because like she goes with like this very like ambiguous like golden brown skin tone for everybody, like it leaves a lot of room for the bad actors of the fandom to whitewash these characters, and it's just that's not fair. That's not cool. I've had to re-record this section like a couple of times just because like I keep getting lost in the weeds a little bit. But the main point that I want to make is that Prythian is not the UK, and you don't need to excuse or you don't need to explain a character not being white in your fantasy world. Like it's just not a conversation that we need to have like today.